Here are the top stories for today, April 26, 2021. Ready for GCQ? An epidemiologist says indicators must be answered first before the NCR Plus shifts to a more relaxed quarantine status despite a decrease in the COVID-19's reproduction rate. Yes to bayanihan, no to further COVID-19 spread. A medical advisor to the government's COVID-19 response speaks up over his recent remarks on community pantries. The country's national security advisor stands firm on the importance of the barangay development program as lawmakers threaten to defund the move. And ASEAN leaders reach a consensus to end violence that has claimed hundreds of lives in Myanmar, almost 3 months after the military coup that overthrown its civilian government. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Is the National Capital Region Plus ready to shift to the less restrictive general community quarantine? Not for now, at least according to an epidemiologist. In a palace briefing, Dr. John Wong from the IATF's Sub-Technical Working Group on Data Analytics said, while the NCR's reproduction number, or R0, has decreased to stringent quarantine measures, it does not forecast whether the region is ready to be under GCQ. Instead, Wong says the national and local governments need to monitor certain indicators. These include the people's compliance with health protocols, how fast they can identify, test, and isolate people with symptoms, and the percentage of cases and close contacts that complete their isolation and quarantine periods. He says the compliance of indoor businesses with health standards such as proper ventilation, masking, and physical distancing should also be monitored. Another question raised by Wong is how fast can the country increase the vaccination pace to 350,000 shots per day. As of April 21, the NCR's R0 has decreased to 0.91, while the country's case fatality rate is at 1.7%. Malacanang assures that the next quarantine status in Metro Manila and other nearby provinces will balance the health, security, and economic interests of the country. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque said the next meeting of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases will specifically review the attack rate and the hospital care utilization rate. It will also check on the economic health of the nation. Roque assured that the IATF-EID will determine whether the quarantine status will be relaxed or retained based on science and hard data. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año earlier said that the task force will tackle the next quarantine classification for NCR Plus tomorrow. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque said the president himself might announce the new quarantine status of the NCR Plus in his talk to the people on Wednesday. For its part, the ARTA research urged the government to retain the modified enhanced community quarantine status in Metro Manila until the reproduction rate is less than 0.9 in a sustained manner. Metro Manila's reproduction rate is currently at 0.93. National Task Force Against the Coronavirus Disease consultant Dr. Ted Herbosa explains he is not against the putting up of community pantries, but do it in a proper way. He said he was saddened by the event and how the public reacts negatively against his tweet. Herbosa resigned as Executive Vice President of University of the Philippines after receiving flack from colleagues for his comment.
Hindi ako kontra sa pantry. Ang kontra ko ay yung pinabayaan nilang mamatay yung ating mga kababayan doon. Pinabayaan nilang pumila sa init ng araw ni walang basong tubig, ni walang maiinom. So, may mali tayong ginawa doon. Kailangan mag-ayos tayo. Sa disaster medicine systems and thinking natin, hindi dapat blame culture, hindi dapat tayo nagsisisihan. Importante na ayusin natin ang sistema at ako ay nagsasuggest lang ng sistema. Pero nilagyan nila ng kulay na politika. At dahil ako po ay nagtatrabaho para sa pamahalaan at sa administrasyon na ito, inilagyan nila ng bahid na politika yung aking sinabi.
Metro Manila mayors have a single message for community pantry organizers. Coordinate with a local government before putting up these pantries. In Resolution 21-08, the Metro Manila Council says this is to ensure observance of health protocols, which is vital to keep the 2-week growth rate of COVID-19 in the region on a downward trend. This as the disease's growth rate decreased to -5% from March 21 to April 17 from 164% in February. While the spirit of Bayanihan highlighted by these activities is laudable, the Council said neglecting health protocols would undermine the efforts to contain COVID-19 during the ECQ and MECQ period. A medical expert also echoed this call. National Task Force Against COVID-19 Medical Advisor Dr. Ted Herbosa says senior citizens should not be allowed to line up at these pantries as they are among those vulnerable to the disease. He says there are other ways to ensure that those in need will get aid from these activities without exposing them to the virus.
Kung gusto mong tumulong, maglagay ka ng bagay doon. At kung gusto mong kumuha ka ng konti doon para sa iyong pamilya. At iikot natin to sa buong bahay. Huwag natin papuntahin ang maraming tao sa isang lugar kasi po hindi tayo mawawala dito sa pandemya. Tandaan nyo, sa MECQ, bawal pa rin po ang mass gathering event.
The Quezon City local government invites all residents and fans of Angel Locsin who went to the community pantry to avail of the free swab testing service, especially those who show symptoms of COVID-19. The city government also appealed to Locsin and her team to coordinate and work closely with the city should they be aware of any individuals who need to be tested immediately. Mayor Joy Belmonte says that while she is thankful for Locsin's generosity, she needs the actress to help the local government in contact tracing efforts. Meanwhile, barangay officials in Barangay Holy Spirit are also monitoring the health of the family of Rolando de la Cruz, an elderly vendor who died after lining up for hours at the community pantry organized by Locsin. The victim also underwent swab testing and tested negative for the COVID-19 disease. Barangay Chairman Felicito Valmosina reiterates his appeal to organizers of community pantries to coordinate with them to prevent a repeat of the incident. Still to come, a sigh of relief for prospective local vaccine makers. The Anti-Red Tape Authority wants the processing of permits completed within a week. And the country's national security advisor stresses the importance of spurring development in villages to address insurgency. Back after a quick break, this is the PNA Newsroom.
Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Prospective local COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers may soon get their necessary permits within a week. This as the Anti-Red Tape Authority, or ARTA, ensures that the directive of President Rodrigo Duterte to set up a green lane for them will be implemented. ARTA Director General Jeremiah Belhica urges Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, to act on the permit applications within 7 working days. Belica said the creation of a green lane is not a suggestion, but a presidential directive that needs to be carried out immediately. Various pharmaceutical companies have already expressed interest to put up a vaccine manufacturing facility in the country. PCOO Secretary Martin Andanar expressed optimism over plans for the local production of COVID-19 vaccines. He says if the Philippines is successful in developing its own COVID-19 jabs, it would be the country's legacy during the pandemic. In his weekly program, Cabinet Report, The New Normal, Andanar said it is about time for the country to build self-sufficiency in developing vaccines. Andanar said developing vaccines is not new to Filipinos since the Philippines donated vaccines to China in 1939 through the Philippine Red Cross. Last week, DOST Undersecretary Rowena Cristina Guevara said the national government is currently in talks with 6 potential local vaccine manufacturers, 2 of which have been aggressive in planning for local production of COVID-19 vaccines. Valenzuela City is prioritizing the elderly in its COVID-19 vaccination program, while Pasig City opens new vaccination sites while waiting for more supplies of the jabs. More on these from Marita Moahe.
The local government of Valenzuela launched an automatic registration of all senior citizens using the existing database. It will be done by batch, and each qualified elder will automatically receive an appointment letter. Mayor Rex Gatchalian said the local government will automatically register all senior residents to make it easier for them to avail of COVID-19 jobs. However, a person may disregard the appointment letter as getting vaccinated is voluntary. In Pasig City, vaccinees who get their first dose of COVID-19 jobs have already reached to 30,000. 14% of these are senior citizens. Mayor Vico Soto, however, said that supply is running out and may be enough for the next 2 weeks. As such, the opening of new vaccination sites are suspended. Meanwhile, the Department of Health says given the storage requirements of Sputnik V, the first to get these Russian-made vaccines would be local governments that have proper storage facilities. Sputnik V must be stored in a dark place at a temperature not exceeding -18 degrees Celsius, while the Sinovac and AstraZeneca vaccines can be stored in facilities with 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. Vergeire said the distribution is likely to be focused on areas under the NCR Plus bubble, where there is a spike in COVID-19 infections. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Moahe.
The government's anti-insurgency body said the Barangay Development Program, or BDP, is for the best interest of underserved barangays. It also denies communist groups the opportunity to take back what was formerly their playground. National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon Jr. appealed to lawmakers to support the BDP. He said that many communities, especially those ones occupied by rebels, have long waited for these sustainable development initiatives since the start of the Duterte administration in the year 2016. Esperon, who is also vice chair of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, defended the BDP's 16.5 billion peso funding. He said stopping the funds for NTF-ELCAC's BDP would mean halting the means to end a divisive conflict that has handicapped the country. The BDP's core programs for projects for each recipient barangay include farm-to-market roads, classrooms, water and sanitation systems, health stations, and livelihood projects. The 91st Infantry Battalion under the Army's 7th Infantry Division formally opened its Sinagtala Community Pantry in 5 towns of Aurora Province over the weekend. Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Reandro Rubio said the project was started with the help of donors who want to assist the townsfolk who are greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The undertaking is in line with the Philippine Army's Kapwa Ko Sagot Ko project. The Bravo Company initially provided 100 kilos of rice, assorted clothing, fish, canned goods, and other food items. The battalion headquarters also provided various kinds of vegetables as well as eggs and noodles. Meanwhile, the Aurora Reservist Shooters Association is currently gathering goods and money for its own community pantry as a means of extending the Bayanihan spirit. And in Nueva Ecija, the 84th Infantry Battalion set up a community pantry in Camp Kapitan Berong Gimba on Saturday with the help of the local government and private donors. About 75 persons got food items from the community pantry, where the 484 IB initially prepared vegetables, sardines, and corned beef. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief of Staff General Cirilito Sobejana previously said that he has ordered the Civil Military Operations Office to support community pantries and other similar activities. Sobejana said they will identify areas under lockdown to deliver food and other necessities. In our business news, the Department of Agriculture is helping farmer groups trade with non-government organizations and other groups who distribute produce to people in need throughout the quarantine period. Assistant Secretary for Agribusiness Christine Evangelista, who leads DA's Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita project, said their private partners have been giving vegetables to different communities since the start of the pandemic. Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita is a direct marketing program of the DA. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, or BFAR, announced their fish producers are open for donors who are buying to contribute to community pantries. Similarly, fish producers are linked to retailers who buy in bulk. The BFAR works with 2 cooperatives buying fish in bulk and will be distributed to sellers or donors. Up next, ASEAN leaders reach a consensus in a bid to end bloodshed in Myanmar. And thousands of e-notes for the Wailing Wall from Filipino pilgrims reach Israel. Details ahead. Stay with the PNA Newsroom.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. The Marawi Sultanate League is satisfied with the progress of the government's rehabilitation and recovery efforts in the war-torn city. MSL Chair Sultan Nasser Sampaco on Sunday thanked Task Force Bangun Marawi for its relentless rebuilding and reconstruction efforts amid the prevailing public health crisis. Sampaco said they will continue to guide, offer moral and spiritual support to the TFBM. TFBM Chair Secretary Eduardo Del Rosario told Sampaco that the government is committed to accomplishing its December 2021 target completion of the rehabilitation works. Del Rosario inspected the projects within the site of the 2017 siege, including the Marawi Museum, Peace Memorial Park and School of Living Tradition, and the Grand Padian Market. He will also inspect rehabilitation works on the Bato Mosque, White Mosque, and Masjid Darussalam. Former members of militant groups ANAKPAWIS and the New People's Army severed their ties with communist terrorist groups. This coincided with the National Democratic Front's 48th anniversary on April 24. About 100 members of ANAKPAWIS Pamplona Municipal Chapter, 75 NPA members, and 30 youths joined the disaffiliation ceremony in Barangay San Juan in Pamplona Town, Cagayan. The former militants said they joined ANAKPAWIS because they were led to believe they have been helping the poor. Several former rebels claimed they were promised various things like education support in exchange for joining the NPA. Balani Barangay Captain Mauricio Aguinaldo denounced the CTGs and its leaders, particularly former ANAKPAWIS party list representative Rafael Mariano, for going around Cagayan to deceive innocent people. ANAKPAWIS, a party list of marginalized sectors, is reportedly an electoral wing of the Kilusang Mayo Uno and Kilusang Mambubukid ng Pilipinas. These were named by CPP founding chairman Jose Maria Sison as part of the CPP-NPA's democratic forces. In sports, the players invited to try out for the Philippine indoor and beach volleyball teams began their COVID-19 testing before making their way to the training bubble in Subic. The Spikers had their RT-PCR testing on Monday, starting with the women's volleyball players and the Philippine National Volleyball Federation staff, followed by the men the next day. The invited beach volleyball players will then take their testing on Wednesday. The testing will all take place at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay. The PNVF required all athletes, coaches, officials, and staff to be tested for COVID-19 48 hours before they proceed to Subic. The indoor volleyball trials are set for Wednesday and Thursday at the Subic Bay Gymnasium, while the beach volleyball tryouts will commence on Friday at the Subic Bay tennis courts. In our news overseas, ASEAN leaders have agreed on a 5-point consensus centering on peaceful resolution in response to the coup d'etat crisis in Myanmar. The regional group, during a meeting in Jakarta, Indonesia, demanded an immediate end of the violence and utmost restraint from all concerned parties. It also called for constructive dialogue to seek a peaceful solution in the interests of the people. A special envoy of the ASEAN chair shall mediate in the dialogue process, while the Southeast Asian bloc will also provide humanitarian assistance. The bloc also stressed the importance of Myanmar's continued efforts to address the situation in Rakhine State, including the repatriation of the Muslim minority in Rohingya in a voluntary, safe, and dignified manner. Meanwhile, for its part, Myanmar's newly formed National Unity Government welcomed the ASEAN's 5-point consensus. The new government, made up of opponents of the military regime, also appreciated Indonesian President Joko Widodo's strong words for Myanmar's junta to release the detainees. They stressed that they are waiting for a firm action by ASEAN to de-escalate the conflict. At least 745 people have been killed since the February 1 military coup. Thousands of e-notes from Filipino pilgrims posted on the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, are set to Israel. The Western Wall e-note initiative started during the Lenten season to cater to Filipinos who were not able to visit the Holy Land due to the pandemic. The notes from the website were placed in the cracks of the historic wall. The Ministry of Tourism in Jerusalem said it believes in Israel's closeness to the hearts of Filipinos, as seen by the number of prayers sent in by pilgrims. The wall in the Old City of Jerusalem is the only remaining part of a retaining wall surrounding the Temple Mount at the site of the First and Second Temples of Jerusalem. Before the pandemic, visitors could write a prayer or wishes on a piece of paper and slip it in between the cracks of the Wailing Wall. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. Ready for GCQ? An epidemiologist says indicators must be answered first before the NCR Plus shifts to a more relaxed quarantine status despite a decrease in the COVID-19's reproduction rate. Yes to bayanihan, no to further COVID-19 spread. A medical advisor to the government's COVID-19 response speaks up over his recent remarks on community pantries. The country's national security advisor stands firm on the importance of the barangay development program as lawmakers threaten to defund the move. And ASEAN leaders reach a consensus to end violence that has claimed hundreds of lives in Myanmar almost 3 months after the military coup that overthrown its civilian government. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day. Stay safe, everyone.